Over the past 6 months, mainstream media has been claiming that America is in the middle of a Gen Z Christian revival right now.
Christian resurgence? Gen Z is reversing a decades-long trend of a declining number of people in the U.S. identifying as Christian.
The quiet revival is underway, from online Christian influencers to an increased belief in God.
But when you dig into the data behind the headlines, you quickly find out that they don't support this narrative. So what's happening? Why are all these outlets so unified? And why, beyond the numbers, does it feel like there's actually something revival-shaped in the air right now? Let's break down what this revival narrative sounds like, the strategies I believe are being used to sane-wash it, and who stands to gain the most from the idea that Christianity, or even Christian nationalism, is somehow inevitable in America. My name's Heidi, and on this channel we deconstruct holy ideas. Let's walk the holy road to Cultland. There's one report in particular that news outlets and social media influencers have all latched onto to prove in some way that religiosity is on the upswing in America and that Gen Z, and particularly young men, are leading the charge. And this is, of course, the Barna report. So I want to look at it real quickly with you. The most important thing of note about the Barna report is that it wasn't conducted among a general cohort of Gen Z men and women, but rather churchgoers, making it a report that can show us some information about Gen Z, but not Gen Z as a generation. So let's look at what it does show us. Well, as we can see here, Gen Z is leading the charge compared to the other generations in one specific regard: how often they attend church. Where millennials attend church 1.8 times per month, Gen Z attends church 1.9 times per month. So let's look at how that's up from the past. Looking here, we can see that this has been a 5-year growth trajectory. Like I said, this tells us something, but does it really tell us about a generational trend among Gen Z? Well, if you're a subscriber to Religion for Breakfast, they actually just released a video a couple days ago on this very topic as I was researching this video. So I want to show you what they had to say about the broader research on the generation of Gen Z coming out of Pew Research.
Even though the overall decline has slowed, younger adults remain much less likely to be Christian than older adults. Only around 46% of 18 to 24-year-olds identify as Christian. Only 27% of them pray daily, and 25% attend a religious service monthly. This is a huge generational gap when we compare to older adults.
So this leads us to ask a couple really important questions. First of all, why are so many news outlets so drawn to a narrative that's clearly not supported in the data that they're citing in a lot of these stories? And what's actually going on, because we kind of know something is going on. So the one thing that we know about young men in Gen Z is that they did in fact vote for Donald Trump.
In 2020, voters under 30 went for President Joe Biden by a 25-point margin. But in 2024, voters under 30 went for Harris by only a 5-point margin. To understand this shift, let's look only at how men voted. In 2020, young men supported Biden by 15 points. In 2024, that support flipped, and young men supported Trump by 13.
And so what it feels like is happening is that you have this very real narrative of young men who voted in outsized proportion for Trump, and this idea that young men are leading the charge of religiosity, and they're being married together to form this meta-narrative that there's this cultural shift that's so big and real happening that is sending young people straight to church because it is the good and real and better option for their life, and they're finally finding that out. But if we already know that half of that narrative has been taken completely out of context and overblown to imply something that is just simply not happening, then what is actually going on here? There's good reason to believe that there are real groups of people with a vested interest in manufacturing the idea that Christianity, or even Christian nationalism, is inevitable in America. While I don't know exactly why mainstream news outlets have harped on this idea of a Christian revival led by young men, I do know that there is a list of facts leading back many years that lay the groundwork for building an argument that not only would conclude that something like that is possible, but maybe even likely. So let's start back just a few years. The Daily Wire was started in 2015 by Ben Shapiro and his partner Jeremy Boring, and notably was brought to life by two Christian nationalist billionaires, the Daily Wire has gone on to gain a foothold in culture, hosting commentators like Jordan Peterson, Matt Walsh, and Michael Knowles. I think there's two really important things to state about the Daily Wire. On the one hand, they are legitimately influential individuals. People really do follow them, really do agree with them, really do listen to them. But also, when your project is being funded by billionaires who seemingly have endless resources to fund your successful and very unsuccessful projects, there is a case to be made that maybe you faked it until you made it somewhere. And maybe even at your most made it level, did you really make it as much as it seems? It is worth noting that even recently, Ben Shapiro has been in the spotlight for potentially padding his views. I looked into this myself on YouTube, and I saw evidence that this could actually be happening, at least on some of his videos. Here's one recent video with about 700K views and only less than 3,000 likes and 785 comments. That seems pretty low, even if you factor in the possibility that he has a loyal audience who just maybe finds him boring, I guess. Here's another example. 750K views, less than 5K likes, and a little over 1,000 comments. Again, this seems unlikely to be purely organic. So what do we have here? Potentially, we have a group of individuals who have real voices and real opinions that real people actually agree with, and maybe also have a backer with a very clear agenda of what they want to get out. They are Christian nationalists, after all, and the resources and abilities, and maybe even a strategy in place to pad popularity of these ideas. Let's talk about another example, Turning Point USA. Now, what I don't want to do is downplay the influence that Charlie Kirk most certainly did have on the conservative movement, on young men, on culture, because I know it's real. But what I will say is, similar to Daily Wire, he was also funded by a billionaire right from the beginning. So some of those same rules apply. He had a lot of time to, let's just say, fake it till you make it, in order to find that successful lane on social media, which is, simply as a matter of fact, different than a true grassroots organization that grows and blossoms truly because people come together under a unified vision. It just is different. But his billionaire was not a Christian nationalist, and I think that's worth noting, because in the first many years of Turning Point USA, they were not focused on culture war issues. They were focused on their billionaire's issues, which were Christian, conservative, libertarian views in politics. And that's essentially what Charlie Kirk did for many years, until, very notably, just a couple of years ago, when headlines started reporting about how he had been welcoming Christian nationalists into his donor base. So I think the broader narrative across both of these media organizations is this: we have billionaire-backed messaging that has the time and patience and resources to get amplified and find its correct audience to gain a legitimate foothold, while also having all the money in the world to make sure that culture believes it is as big as they possibly can believe that it is. And notably, the very difficult questions to answer because of these scenarios are things like, how popular are these messages actually? How many raw organic views do they actually get? Would they have actually had the amount of grassroots support needed to amplify their messaging into culture without that backing? How much of these projects are real and authentic and organic, and how much is bought and paid for? We just simply don't know, because we never really had the chance to find out. What we do know is that there absolutely is a vested interest among Christian, conservative billionaires, especially Christian nationalists, to invest in media and put out their agenda through those media outlets. And one of the reasons we know that this is a major strategy isn't just the fact that these two media organizations maybe only exist because of it, but because of this reporting that just came out recently from Mother Jones. There is now, in fact, a whole hidden network of conservatives bankrolling an ecosystem of right-wing news. The reporting indicates that the goal of this ecosystem is to create the appearance of a decentralized news network, while in fact, all of these different news sources are highly centralized and highly coordinated. The network's thousands of platforms have quietly shaped public opinion by stoking an array of right-wing conspiracy theories. This is a great example of the kind of thing that I think a lot of centrists and leftists have wondered and believed could be true for a long time, but we didn't have the proof. And we would look at the Daily Wires and we would look at the TPUSA and go, well, they have a lot of billionaire backing. Couldn't something like this be going on behind the scenes? And now we're seeing come to broad daylight this explicit goal to generate narratives, to manipulate narratives, to create the illusion of consensus that maybe never really existed. And so now if we go back a few months and ask that question again, why did all these news outlets cover this Christian revival, twisting data to make it sound uniformly like something it wasn't? Maybe it's not that crazy to wonder if it was part of something like this. What I think all of this points to is something that's much bigger than one symptom, one trend, one report, but rather this group of Christian nationalist billionaires who have a very specific agenda for the America that they want to see come to fruition. They understand culture, they understand media, they have all the time and resources in the world to fake it till they make it, to pad views until those lead to real views, to manufacture public sentiment until that public sentiment becomes real. And the thing that I find really disheartening about all of this is the fact that I believe that they have this wide open door because of the conservative religious structure of Christianity. Because in large parts of these circles, they already tend to believe that leaders don't just interpret scripture, but are allowed to demand compliance with their interpretation of scripture. They're allowed to tell the people that they have charge over, here are the policy implications that you need to support as a product of this particular interpretation I'm telling you is the right one. And the followers get into a pattern of offloading their moral agency to their leaders. And this has made its way onto social media in a very real way, where social media influencers who are conservative Christians have now become authority figures like pastors who are already capable of spiritual abuse. And that spiritual abuse is now broadened to the social media landscape, where you can think you really trust a person, but you don't actually know what that person's intentions are. And in conservative Christianity, it always seems to work the same way. They start out with a belief that you buy into, and you don't think there's any reason why you could question that belief. But then that belief becomes social pressure, and that social pressure forms the belief into your identity. So now all of a sudden, someone telling you they believe something else is like questioning your sense of self. It's like questioning God. And you can't stand for that, and that's not okay. And this is where I think there's been a huge wedge that's happened in our society, where conservative Christians are convinced that by questioning a political stance, they're questioning their belief in God. They're questioning their faith. They're questioning maybe whether God is real. And that's intolerable to them. And so they cannot and will not question any of their political stances. And knowing that these ideas have coalesced into one idea, I believe is part of the reason why we're seeing this type of plan take root and actually be successful. So if you're a Christian watching this, I don't want you to hear that I think you're dumb or just easy to manipulate. I think that there are a lot of Christians who know how to think for themselves, and that's not really who I'm talking to. I'm talking about what tend to be more of the conservative Christians or the MAGA Christians who have very much fused their religious identity and their political identity into one. And I believe now they have opened the door to Christian nationalists manipulating that foundation for their own gain. But what do you think? Is there some legitimacy to this Gen Z Christian revival story? Do you think that the Christian nationalist billionaires are performing a psyop on all of us to unilaterally hand over our rights? Let us know in the comments. Thanks so much for watching all the way to the end and supporting the work. If you're looking for another video to watch next, I'd recommend this one, where I look into a different Christian nationalist billionaire plot to completely destroy and revamp the education system in their image. And we'll catch you in the next one.